one of our biggest things in our mission statement is to provide a program so that every mother who wants to donate their birth tissue has that opportunity at our programs. So minus a few things where we're regulatory wise, we do have to screen mothers against a medical criteria. It's still an organ that's going to be transplanted into another person, so we can't necessarily have everything. Any communicable diseases that generally rules a patient out.
Welcome to Business Ninjas, brought to you by WriteForMe, where you'll hear from business leaders who are out there growing their business and slaying it every day. Learn from the masters. Let's get started.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back for another episode of Business Ninjas. I'm here today with Brett Miller. He's the Director of Operations at telaGen. Brett, welcome to the show.
Hey, Kelsey, thanks for having us.
Yeah, excited to have you today. So,
Absolutely.
Brett, why don't you start? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So name's Brett Miller, Director of Operations here at telaGen. We are a biotissue company based out of Tallahassee, Florida. I've lived here my whole life. Married, 4 kids and a foster, so 5 at the house. Was a paramedic for a long time. I guess that's kind of where we cut our teeth in the biotech industry on the operations side. Both our COO and myself were paramedics, actually partners on the ambulance. So that's kind of where we got started there, and just figuring out the logistics of taking care of folks and moving stuff down the road. So that's kind of it.
That's fantastic. It sounds like you've got an interesting story, kind of with your CEO taking you to telaGen. Tell me more about telaGen.
Yeah, so telaGen is a living donor birth tissue recovery agency. We are part of the organ donation community, but we're a very small part. Live living donor is only probably less than 1% of all of the actual industry. So when we started about 10 years ago, we're 1 month shy from our 10-year anniversary. We started in late November, excuse me, of 2013. And really just wanted to provide the best service. We saw a need in the industry that's, where charts took forever, and it was kind of an older, outdated system that was tied to the cadaveric side, which is pretty much what everybody's familiar with organ donation. The Save a Life or Donate Life, those kind of campaigns. Mostly everybody's heard of them and are familiar with that side of organ donation, but they don't really, and it's not as attractive to say, well, I donated my placenta as it is, I give blood, or, my loved one passed away and we donated their kidneys or their organs. There's a little bit more, I guess, nostalgia with that because it's been around a lot longer, or been mainstream a lot longer, rather. So for us, we only do living donor. So we only are in the placenta donation space. And now it's really called birth tissue because it encompasses more than just the placenta. You've got obviously the actual placenta, but then you've got the umbilical cord, amniotic fluid, umbilical cord blood is also something that mothers can donate. And there's outlets for those tissues to be turned into products that help save lives.
And talk to me a little bit more about those products. I find this absolutely fascinating.
Yeah. So, and it's mostly, and it gets kind of in the weeds. So I'll try to stay high level with it because you can get down into all of the specifics of what products are regulated as what. Mostly what we do are think of skin grafts. So any kind of wound where you would put a skin graft, normally you would think of like burn patients need a skin graft. And for the longest time, historically, it's been either a cadaver skin that they've used, or they've used the patient's own skin. So say if you have a big burn on your chest or on your arms, well, you might take skin from your back or your butt or the back of your leg, and that would then be transplanted on yourself. That's as a skin graft there. But the problem with that is now you have 2 wounds. You have the wound that you're covering and the wound that you've created to fix the problem. So there's obviously infection problems with that. There's where the graft doesn't adhere, through whatever mechanism of action that it causes. But so there's some problems there. So then about 100 years ago, they started and it was at, major universities. I think Johns Hopkins, if I did my research right, was where it all started in 1914. Sometime around then, it was major teaching universities, and they said, well, we're going to try something with a placenta. And so they had a burn unit, and they had a labor delivery unit. And they said, well, take the placenta over there and put it on this person. And what they found out over many, many years, a century now, is that amnion tissue that came from the mother and then is transplanted to a burn victim or any kind of wound care patient is antimicrobial, anti-scarring. All of the things that happen inside the womb with that amnion happens outside to a transplant donor. So what you end up with is burn patients that don't have scars, like you've typically seen on skin graft recipients. You sometimes see that fenestration, that webbing like checkerboard look, and that's just how it happens. But with amnion grafts, you don't have that. You're actually making your body signal its own innate ability to heal itself. So yeah.
That's fascinating. And while you were talking about, and correct me if I'm saying this wrong, but amnions, I'm thinking to myself, that just grew a whole human. So it makes sense that it can.
Yeah. So every,
Makes sense.
and every, our CEO, David Hill, he likes to say that everything God made inside the womb is still there, and it's running through that tissue back and forth. It's just penetrating it. So everything from two cells down to 9 up to 10 trillion cells in our body, everything started at this one location, and it runs through there with amniotic fluid and just tons of cytokines and peptides and all the scientific stuff that goes over my head. But they've told me, when I start talking about it, that, oh, you sound really smart. It's like, no, I just know a few big words. So it gets really deep. But that's really what it is. What you just said is that everything that grew from a little baby is still there in that tissue, and it's still there to help that baby and help the outside world.
And so if someone wanted to donate, their birth tissue, how would they go about that? Is it something that they have to say before labor, after labor? What are the protocols for? I have so many questions. What are the protocols after birth? How do they get it to telaGen?
Yeah. So, and part of telaGen's uniqueness is that we partner with hospitals. Right now, we're in about 50 hospitals nationwide. That encompasses 24 offices, 6 states, 3 time zones. So to say that and we don't have anything in New York. So let's just say New York. We're mostly in the Southeast. But in New York, if you were having a baby in New York and you wanted to donate your birth tissue, it wouldn't necessarily be with a telaGen program, because we partner with those hospitals to grow and develop those programs. It's their program. We're just helping run it. And so what we do with that is we've partnered with them to provide their mothers who are having their delivering at their hospitals. We've provided a way that their program can be utilized there at that hospital. So yeah, it can be done. Usually we like to know ahead of time. It's primarily scheduled C-sections. We do vaginal deliveries, and we have add-on C-sections. So that's not necessarily a problem if you were not a C-section going in to deliver your baby, but then you turned into be a C-section because of whatever complications you had, and there's a few of those. So when we say that it's C-sections, it's any delivery. We have programs for vaginal deliveries, C-sections, scheduled and emergent, non-scheduled. We just have to have a program there for telaGen.
Interesting. And so it sounds like you're able to partner, so the patients, the people in need of this birth tissue are able to benefit. So it's not necessarily like a competitive field. It's more so supportive to say, we really want to make sure that this birth tissue in these hospitals are supported and getting to the people in needs.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're spot on there, Kelsey. So one of our biggest things in our mission statement is to provide a program so that every mother who wants to donate their birth tissue has that opportunity at our programs. So minus a few things where we're regulatory wise, we do have to screen mothers against a medical criteria. It's still an organ that's going to be transplanted into another person. So we can't necessarily have everything. Any communicable diseases that generally rules a patient out. So, and part of that program is that the mother never knows that. Like we want them to, feel good about what they've done, because a lot of times mothers don't know that this is an option. They've never even heard of it. Excuse me. They've never heard of a birth tissue donation program. So sometimes they'll say, "Oh, that's weird," and then what we really have to do is offset that weirdness for them and say, "Well, have you ever donated your blood?" Because essentially there's no difference here. It's a gift that you are giving to help someone else heal or live. With especially with wound care, it being on the rise, through diabetes, trauma, different things like that. These grafts are needed to be able to help these folks who have those life-threatening injuries or diseases, to be able to function at a very high level and high quality of life.
Mhm. And I did a little research, obviously, before
Yeah.
we hopped on. And is there a difference between donating birth tissue and then donating umbilical cord blood?
So to us, there's no difference.
Mhm.
It's just a different part of the birth
Okay.
tissue.
Okay.
So for us, the process is all the same. You would still have to be cleared through a medical social questionnaire, which we call MSH. In the industry, they call it a DRE. It's a donor, and I'm terrible with acronyms.
No, it's
It's a
okay.
donor assessment
Yeah.
questionnaire,
Okay. Okay. That
but
makes
they
sense.
call it a DRE, a DRAE. We call it the medical social history. So that's just a little, and it might
Yeah.
not be for industry, whatnot. But if I say medical social history, every processor knows what I'm talking about. They know that we're talking about the DRE.
Yeah.
So that doesn't matter whether you're doing an umbilical cord, placenta, amniotic fluid, or cord blood. It's all the same processes up to the point of donation. At
Mhm.
that point, it becomes a little bit different with how things are recovered and collected and packaged, but that's about the only difference.
Okay. Okay. Well, Brett, I think this has been an absolutely fascinating conversation.
Yeah.
As we start to wrap up, is there anything that you want to leave our listeners with, whether it be about telaGen, about, birth tissue, the industry in general, anything you want to leave our listeners with? Any
Yeah,
advice?
absolutely. If I can say one thing about it, it's, there's a stigma behind tissue donation, but everybody knows somebody who could benefit from this graft. Everybody I've ever talked to knows someone with diabetes, or who has had a burn, or who's had surgery. So the need out there it's an exponential need every year of, the number of patients who could benefit from this tissue, and these donations, these birth tissue donations. But the education is not, it's not as widespread as we'd like. So that's what we do these type of interviews for, is so that we can spread the word of tissue donation, of all kinds, not just birth tissue donation. We're big believers in organ donations. We personally, we're a big believer, you can't take it with you. So as long as you didn't mess it up while you're here, you might as well go ahead and give it to somebody else.
Well, Brett, this has been terrific. I love this conversation. I think it's absolutely fascinating. I hope to, continue to help spread the word for you folks to be able to, like you said, get the word out, provide that knowledge and that understanding, reduce that stigma. I think this has been a terrific conversation. I really appreciate you being on Business Ninjas today.
Kelsey, I really appreciate the opportunity to speak on about telaGen and tell the world about some birth tissue donations. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Great to have you.